Recently, I got a mail from Amazon Web Services that my AWS Solutions Architect Associate exam is going to expire soon. So I thought, why not test my knowledge and create something that will help you prepare for your exam as well. So after a lot of research, we created an exam practice test which is very close to the real exam. And in this video, we are going to look at important AWS exam questions. So if you are preparing for the AWS Solutions Architect Associate exam, make sure to watch this video till the end and also check out the link for the Udemy practice test. Let's go. This is the practice exam that I have published to help you pass for your AWS Solutions Architect Associate exam. This practice exam consists 6 sets of practice tests, all containing 65 questions each, which will be very similar to the real exam questions. If you pass this exam, you will definitely pass the real AWS Solutions Architect exam. So the first question we have here is, a company needs the ability to analyze the log files of its proprietary application. The log files are stored in JSON format in the Amazon S3 bucket. Queries will be simple and will run on demand. A solutions architect needs to perform the analysis with minimal changes to the existing architecture. What should the solutions architect do to meet this requirement with least amount of operational overhead? To show you this with a solutions architect diagram, you have an application here, and this application is giving out log files which we are storing in Amazon S3 bucket. On this S3 bucket, the data is stored in JSON format and you need to run some queries on it. So whenever you want to analyze data through SQL queries on Amazon S3 bucket, it will always be through Athena in the exam. So if you search for Amazon Athena, you will see Amazon Athena is a serverless analytics service that allows user to analyze data in Amazon S3 using SQL. So the correct answer will be using Amazon Athena. Let's also understand why these are not the correct answer. So in the practice test, you will also see explanations on why Redshift is not the correct answer, because Redshift is a data warehousing and it is generally used for complex analytics. So Redshift is data warehousing service designed for complex analytics and large scale data processing. For simple on-demand queries, as mentioned in this question, Redshift is not the correct answer. Next is CloudWatch. So CloudWatch in AWS is a service that will monitor and also collect logs. It is not used for running, analyzing or running queries on it. So CloudWatch is primarily designed for collecting and monitoring application, not for performing interactive SQL queries. We want to run some queries on the data. That is why we are using Athena. Athena is a serverless query service that allows you to query data using standard SQL. Lastly, we have Glue as well. So you can use Glue, but you need to do extra things. The Glue will require you to create catalog, and then you need to use Amazon EMR, which is more work. Whereas in the exam question, it is asking you to use least amount of operational overhead. So this answer is wrong because it involves creating a data catalog and launching an EMR cluster on each query. As you can see, this practice test is created to explain you and learn things, not just pass the exam. And you have all the explanations here for correct and incorrect options, also overall explanation and a link for you to read from the official AWS documentation. So when you click on this, you can understand how you can query JSON data using Amazon Athena, which is going to be stored on S3 bucket. So we run queries like this on the S3 bucket, and then we can analyze data as mentioned in this question here. So let's move on to the next question now. In this question, a company uses AWS organization to manage multiple AWS accounts from different departments, and the main or the management account has Amazon S3 bucket. So let's try to understand this with a diagram. So you're working in a company where you have AWS organization and there are multiple AWS accounts that are managed inside these AWS organization. The main account or the management account here has S3 bucket, which contains all your project files. Okay, so this is the S3 bucket that is containing all the project files. This management account wants accounts from this organization only to access this S3 bucket. No one outside the organization should be able to access it. So we want only these accounts to be able to access it. How can you do it? So the company wants to limit access to this S3 bucket to only users of the account within the organization. Which solutions meet this requirement? To do this, we can set a global condition of AWS equals to principal organization ID, which will check the ID, and if it belongs to that organization, only then the account will have access to S3 bucket. So this is the correct answer. Full access to AWS using the AWS organizations of IAM principle. And this is the block that explains how you can use this condition key to give access to a particular service in your organization. Let's move on to the next question now. Alright, the third question we have here is, an application runs on Amazon EC2 instance in a VPC. The application processes logs that are stored in Amazon S3 bucket. The EC2 instance need access to the S3 bucket without connectivity to the internet. Which solution will provide private network connectivity to Amazon S3? Let's try to understand the question now. So we have an application that is running on Amazon EC2 instance inside a VPC. So that we want this EC2 instance to connect or to access S3 bucket privately without the internet. So how can you do that? Whenever you have a question about connecting an AWS service through private connection, you will always look for endpoints. So in first option we have here is create a gateway VPC endpoint to S3 bucket. A VPC endpoint lets you connect to S3 bucket without connecting to the internet. So this is most likely the right answer. But the next option is stream the logs to Amazon CloudWatch logs and export the log to S3 bucket. This is adding extra step of putting the logs in Amazon CloudWatch, and then this is not private, so this is not the correct answer. Instance profile can actually let you access S3 bucket, but again this is not private, this is going to be public. Create an Amazon API gateway. API gateway is not used for accessing different services. It is usually to create APIs, so again this is not the right answer. Let's check it. So you can see this is actually a correct answer. A gateway VPC endpoint enables private communication between your VPC and supported AWS services. In AWS, there are two types of endpoints, VPC endpoints, and you also have S3 endpoint. If you want to access S3 services without internet, you can use S3 endpoint. But here we are talking about connecting EC2 instance in a VPC to an S3 bucket privately. So that's why we are using gateway VPC endpoint. As you can see, this is not the correct answer because this is not going to be private. It is going to be through public internet. This is again not private. That's why we cannot use instance profile. API gateway is used for creating and managing APIs. It is not used for connection. So we have overall explanation here, and we also have a documentation link mentioned in the practice test. So you can see how you can use gateway endpoints for Amazon S3. So you can access Amazon S3 from your VPC using gateway VPC endpoint, and you can do this without connecting to the internet. So now let's move on to the next question. The next question here is, a company is hosting a web application on AWS using single Amazon EC2 instance that stores user uploaded documents in Amazon EBS volume. So we have an application on EC2 that stores data on Amazon EBS. EBS stands for Elastic Block Storage. For better scalability and availability, the company duplicated the architecture and created a second EC2 instance and also an EBS volume in another AZ, placing them both behind the load balancer. After completing this change, user reported that each time they refreshed the website, they could see only one subset of this document or the other, but never all the document at the same time. What should a solutions architect propose to ensure users see all of their documents at once? This is a very interesting question and actually something that people face on everyday thing. So let me explain you this with a diagram here. According to this question, you have an EC2 instance, and this EC2 instance is attached to an Elastic Block Store, which is storing all the user data. Now the company has replicated the same thing, and they have two different instances, also another EBS, and these are behind a load balancer. So when a user tries to access the data, they either get some part of their data, not like some part which might be stored here or which might be stored here, not the complete information. So how can you solve this issue? So the problem here is with the storage EBS or Elastic Block Store. If you have multiple EC2 instances and you want to share the data between them, instead of using EBS, you should be using EFS. So EFS is Elastic File System that will make sure that the data is present, complete, accurate for both of these servers. So the answer here is going to be using EFS instead of using EFS. So copy the data from both EBS volume to Amazon EFS. Let's check the answer, and it's correct because Amazon EFS provides a shared file system accessible by both EC2 instances, ensuring all users can access all documents regardless of which instance they are routed to. This will be most likely in your exam, so make sure you practice this. Moving on to the next question now. In this question, a company uses network file storage to store large video files in on-premise network attached storage. Each video file ranges in size from 1 MB to 500 GB, and the total storage is 70 TB or terabytes and is no longer growing. The company decides to migrate the video files to Amazon S3 bucket. So according to this question, we have a company which is storing all their video files on premises, and each video file ranges from 1 MB to 500 GB, and the total storage is 70 TB, and they want to migrate this on-premise storage to S3 bucket. The company must migrate the video files as soon as possible while using the least possible network bandwidth. Which solution will meet this requirement? So whenever it is about least possible network bandwidth, most likely it will not be through the public internet, it will be privately. And whenever it is a huge amount of data that you need to migrate, you will most likely use the snow devices. So in this question, or in the answer here, we have a snowball edge mentioned, and I think most likely this is the answer. So let's check the answer. The answer here is Snowball Edge provides high bandwidth local transfers and minimizes network usage. This is ideal for large data sets like video files, accelerating the transfer. Let's also see why Direct Connect is not the right answer, because Direct Connect offers high bandwidth than the public internet, but it still be slower than Snowball Edge for very large files and may involve higher setup and ongoing cost. So we want to have low cost, we also want to have least possible network bandwidth and as soon as possible. That's why Snowball Edge is the right answer. You can read the complete explanation here, or you can also click on this link to learn about how you can use Snowball Edge to migrate data to Amazon S3. Again, a very important question, and I think most likely there will always be a question, maybe not on Snowball Edge or maybe other Snowball devices, but there will always be a question on how you can migrate data from on-premise to AWS. Now let's move on to the next question. So we are going to cover 10 questions from this practice test, and if you wish to do more, the link for this practice test is in this video description. If you are a subscriber, let me know and I can share you some coupon code. But let's move on to this next question. A company has an application that runs on Amazon EC2 instance and uses Amazon Aurora database. The EC2 instances connect to the database by using username and password that are stored locally. The company wants to minimize the operational overhead of credential management. In AWS, whenever it is credential management, it is always talking about AWS Secrets Manager service. Secret Manager service in AWS are generally used to store API keys, access keys, database passwords, etc. In the question, the company has EC2 instance that is connecting to an Amazon Aurora database through username and password, which are stored in file. But you should be storing it in Amazon Secrets Manager, because Secrets Manager provides you with many different features like password rotation, access management, a lot more. So I will be using this. The second option, use system manager parameter store, is also a correct option, but it does not have an option of automatic rotation. So this is not the correct answer here. Whereas using KMS or using Elastic Block Store is not easier compared to Secrets Manager. You can easily do it with Secrets Manager. So I think that's the correct answer, but you can always read the explanation for it here. This practice test has explanations for incorrect answers as well, and you can also read about AWS Secrets Manager more if you want by clicking on this resources link. Let's move on to the next question now. In this question, a company has an application that ingests incoming messages. Dozens of their application and microservices then quickly consume these messages. The number of messages varies drastically and sometimes increases suddenly to 100,000 each second. A company wants to decouple a solution and increase scalability. Which solution meets this requirement? So I will tell you a trick now. Whenever you have a question in the exam, look for the keywords. In this question, they are talking about messages, incoming messages, and they want a solution that will decouple it and increase scalability. So whenever I look at this keyword here, decouple, I immediately get to know that this is something about Amazon SQS, because if you generally search for Amazon SQS here, so if I search for AWS SQS, see here Amazon SQS offers secure, durable and available hosted queue that lets you integrate and decouple distributed software. So whenever it is about decoupling and it is about messaging, you will always check for Amazon SQS. So according to this question, I think publishing the message to Amazon SNS topic with multiple SQS queue, configure the consumer application to process and message from the queues. This is a correct answer, and if you see, this is the correct answer, because look for the keywords if you don't know the answer completely. So the architecture provides excellent decoupling and scalability, and if you want to scroll down, you can always click on this and read more about how SQS SNS work and how they can be used. So if you look at SQS, you will always find how SQS is used for decoupling microservices. So you can see decoupling microservices. This is the selling point of SQS. So whenever in the exam you see decoupling, it will always be SQS. In this question, we have a global company hosts its web application on Amazon EC2 instance behind an application load balancer. The web application has static and dynamic data. The company stores its static data in Amazon S3 bucket, and the company wants to improve performance and reduce latency for the static data and dynamic data. Company is using its own domain name registered with Amazon Route 53. What should a solutions architect do to meet this requirement? Let me explain you this question properly so you can answer them easily. So in this question, a company has an application on Amazon EC2 instance. So they have their application running on Amazon EC2 instance, and this application has dynamic data, also static data. The static data is stored on S3 bucket. So here we have S3 bucket that is storing all the static data, and this application is behind a load balancer. So this is a load balancer behind which we have our application running on the AWS EC2 instance. Now, according to the question, the company wants to improve performance and reduce latency for static data and dynamic data both. A company is using its own domain name, so they also want to be using their own domain name. How can you use it? So in AWS, there's something known as Cloudfront. A Cloudfront is a service which is used as a content delivery network. So if you search for Cloudfront in AWS, so Cloudfront service is a content delivery network used to speed up the delivery of web content to the user. So you can use Cloudfront for this use case, and you can use it to distribute both your static and dynamic content quickly. So when using Cloudfront, you can put Cloudfront in front of this, and Cloudfront will be used, or you can use load balancer for your dynamic data, S3 for your static data as an origin for the Cloudfront, and whenever user tries to reach out to your website, all the static and the dynamic data is going to be stored in the edge location inside this Cloudfront. So this is how you can use Cloudfront to make your content distribution faster. So in the options, you can see Cloudfront here, Cloudfront that has S3 bucket and ALB as the origin, which can be used to manage both static and dynamic data because Cloudfront supports both. Whereas the second option says use Cloudfront that has ALB as the origin and AWS Global Accelerator that has S3 bucket as the origin. Not required because Cloudfront can manage both S3 and ALB static and dynamic data both. So this is not required. Similarly, Cloudfront that has S3 as the origin, create Global Accelerator that has ALB and Cloudfront as endpoint. Not required. This is going to be extra service. So we can do the same thing with this with less operational overhead. So the correct answer is Cloudfront to manage both S3 and ALB. So you can see Cloudfront is a global network, content delivery network that cache static from S3 and dynamic data from ALB at edge location, reducing latency and improving performance of the users worldwide. Whereas all these options are wrong, and you can always read the explanations here on this practice test. And if you want to learn more about Cloudfront, you can always click on this link. So if you try to understand the questions properly in the exam, you can easily answer them. The questions are not that difficult, and if you these options are very much similar to each other. You just need to understand what service is used for what are different features, and so on. I hope this video will help you pass your exam. With that being said, let's move on to the next question. A company performs monthly maintenance on its AWS infrastructure. During this maintenance activities, the company need to rotate the credentials for its Amazon RDS for MySQL database across multiple AWS regions. So in the previous question we saw, whenever you want to rotate your credential, you will always be using AWS Secrets Manager, because AWS Systems Manager, which is also used to store credentials, does not have the rotation option. So we will be using Secrets Manager, and in this option here, Secrets Manager is present here. So store the credential as secrets in the Secret Manager and use multi-regions secret replication for required regions. So let's click on check answer, and this is the correct answer. So you can use Secrets Manager, which provides built-in support for automatic secret rotation with minimal operation overhead. It also allows for multi-region secret replication as mentioned in this question here. So the company needs to rotate credentials for its MySQL database across multiple regions. So this is also supported in AWS Secrets Manager. And you can again read the explanation here or read about how to rotate AWS Secrets Manager secrets on this official AWS documentation. Moving on, let's look at the last question for this video. And if you want to read more or practice more, you can always check out the Udemy course. The link is in description. The last question here says, a company runs an e-commerce application on Amazon EC2 instance behind application load balancer. The instance is run in Amazon EC2 autoscaling group across multiple AZs, and the autoscaling group scale based on the CPU utilization metrics, and the e-commerce application store transaction data in MySQL 8.0 database that is hosted on a large EC2 instance. Okay, to understand this so far, we have an application that is running on Amazon EC2 behind a load balancer, and his autoscaling group is also used to automatically create these servers. The autoscaling group uses CPU utilization, and the application also have a database which is MySQL 8.0 database on a large EC2 instance. Alright, the database performance degrades quickly as application load increases. The application handles more read requests than the write transaction. The company wants a solution that will automatically scale the database to meet the demand of unpredictable read workloads while maintaining high availability. So if you try to understand this, AWS will always be selling their services to the customers. They will always be selling the managed solutions. So in the question here, the e-commerce application is using MySQL database on EC2 instance, and the company wants to have something that should be automatically scaled and should also be highly available. So all this is leading you to the RDS database. RDS database is a managed service in AWS that can be used to create SQL databases like MySQL, Postgres, Oracle DB, etc. So you can use RDS, but here in the RDS says single AZ, whereas they want to have high availability, so we have to use multi-AZ. Whereas Amazon Aurora is actually a right answer, because Amazon Aurora has two flavors, MySQL and Postgres. Aurora is highly available, it has auto scaling options. So all these things lead us to this Amazon Aurora, and Aurora is available for MySQL. It is a bit pricey, but it can help you for automatic scaling, and it can also help you for a high availability. So I think this is the right answer. Let's check the answer, and you can see it's the correct answer, because Amazon Aurora is a MySQL compatible managed database service that offers high availability and scalability. Aurora allows automatic scaling and so on, and you can always read the explanations here. So this is how you should be answering your questions. If you don't know the correct answer, you can always try to find the answer by looking at the keywords in the questions or by omitting the answer. For example, like Elastic Cache does not support MySQL, so you cannot use this. Whereas Redshift again is not an SQL database, it is a warehousing, so you cannot use this. These two are the correct answers, but here it is mentioning single AZ, so this is not the correct answer, which makes Amazon Aurora the correct answer. So I try to use this tactic, and you can also use the same. For now, let's go and click on finish test to see what is the score. And if I click on finish test, you can see we have answered 10 out of 10 questions correct, and the score is 15%. You can always review your answers here by clicking on the review option and then go through the answers in this, and this will help you prepare for your exam. I hope this video was informative. If you have any questions, any doubt about this practice test or about the AWS Solutions Architect exam, let me know in the comment section, and if you wish to buy this course, the link is in description. Thank you and have a good day.